Emotional distance does not announce itself with conflict or clear endings. It begins quietly, almost politely. A pause that lasts a second longer than before. A question that no longer feels necessary to ask. At first, nothing seems wrong. Conversations still happen. Messages are exchanged. Time is shared. But something subtle has changed in how those moments feel. The warmth inside them thins. Presence becomes partial. Attention drifts even while bodies remain close. It is not absence that marks the beginning of distance. It is the fading of emotional texture. People often recognize it only in hindsight. Looking back, they notice how curiosity softened into routine, how listening turned into waiting, how laughter still occurred, but felt lighter, less anchored. Emotional closeness once lived in small details. The tone of a voice, the instinct to reach out, the feeling of being held in someone's awareness. When distance begins, those details slowly dissolve. There is often confusion at this stage. Nothing dramatic has happened. No clear wound explains the shift. That uncertainty makes the distance harder to name. It feels safer to assume it is temporary, caused by stress or time. The mind searches for logical explanations, while the emotional body senses a quiet retreat. Distance does not grow from lack of care alone. Sometimes it grows from adaptation, from learning when not to speak, from noticing which emotions receive silence instead of understanding, from realizing that being fully open no longer feels welcomed or safe. The heart responds by stepping back gently, hoping the space will go unnoticed. In this early phase, people are still emotionally present enough to feel the change, but not enough to stop it. There is a strange duality, missing closeness while still being close, wanting connection, yet not knowing how to reach it anymore. The discomfort is subtle, like background noise that never fully disappears. This is the moment where emotional distance first takes shape. Not as separation, but as a quiet shift in how connection is held. A space that begins forming between what is shared and what is felt. And once that space exists, it slowly teaches the heart how to live with less. Emotional distance rarely begins with intention. It begins with adjustment. At some point, something small is felt but not expressed. A need goes unmet, not because it was denied, but because it was never fully seen. The moment passes. Nothing breaks. Yet the emotional system remembers. It learns quietly what is safe to share and what requires restraint. Over time, these moments collect, not as memories, but as patterns. The mind starts anticipating outcomes before emotions are even formed. Vulnerability becomes selective. Words are chosen carefully, not for honesty, but for stability. The relationship, or connection, continues, but it does so on newly defined emotional terms. Distance often forms where care still exists. When someone learns that certain feelings complicate things, they begin simplifying themselves. Not out of deception, but out of preservation. Emotional expression becomes filtered. What once flowed freely is now measured. The heart does not close suddenly, it narrows. Routine also plays a quiet role. Familiarity, while comforting, can reduce attentiveness. Assumptions replace curiosity. Listening becomes efficient rather than engaged. When attention fades, emotional safety can follow. People stop checking in, not because they do not care, but because nothing appears wrong. Silence is mistaken for peace. There is also the influence of survival. Stress, responsibility, and emotional fatigue reshape priorities. When energy is limited, emotions feel expensive. Connection begins to feel like another task to manage rather than a space to rest. The nervous system adapts by creating distance, conserving emotional resources without conscious awareness. In many cases, emotional distance is learned early. Past experiences teach that closeness can lead to disappointment, misunderstanding, or loss. When old patterns resurface, the body responds faster than thought. It remembers what happened before and adjusts accordingly. Distance becomes a familiar form of control. By the time people notice the gap, it already feels normal. The emotional retreat has integrated itself into daily interaction. Nothing feels broken enough to fix, yet something essential feels absent. The origin of distance is rarely a single moment. It is a slow accumulation of quiet lessons about what closeness costs. And once those lessons are learned, the heart begins to carry them forward. Carefully, silently, and without protest. Emotional distance deepens not through choice, but through regulation. The mind adjusts long before the heart understands what is happening. From a psychological perspective, closeness requires emotional energy, attention, empathy, responsiveness. These are not passive states. They demand presence. When emotional exchanges begin to feel unpredictable or unrewarding, the brain looks for ways to reduce strain. It does not seek distance as punishment. It seeks it as balance. Attachment systems play a quiet role here. When connection feels secure, the nervous system relaxes into openness. When it feels uncertain, it shifts into protection. For some, that protection looks like withdrawal. Less emotional investment. Fewer internal risks. The mind learns that distance reduces disappointment, even if it also reduces intimacy. Neuroscience shows that repeated emotional stress can dull responsiveness. The brain conserves energy by lowering sensitivity. Feelings are still present, but they arrive muted. This is not indifference, it is emotional fatigue, a state where caring costs more than it once did. Cognitive patterns also change. Expectations lower. The mind stops anticipating emotional reciprocity. Instead of reaching outward, it turns inward. Thoughts become more self-contained. Emotional processing happens privately, without shared reflection. Over time, this internalization becomes habitual. What makes this withdrawal difficult to notice is its subtlety. There is no clear moment of disengagement. Daily functioning continues. Responsibilities are met. Conversations remain polite, even warm, but depth is missing. Emotional exchanges skim the surface, avoiding complexity. Distance can feel strangely calming at first. With fewer emotional fluctuations, there is stability, predictability, a sense of control. The mind interprets this as relief. But beneath that calm, something essential is being bypassed. The human need to be emotionally mirrored. Psychologically, the mind believes it is protecting the self. Yet what it is really doing is reducing exposure. The cost of that protection becomes clear only later, when connection feels harder to access, even when it is wanted. This is the quiet paradox of emotional distance. It begins as regulation, but slowly becomes isolation. Not chosen, not dramatic, just learned, reinforced, and eventually normalized. There comes a moment when emotional distance is no longer subtle. It is not loud, but it is present. The space between people becomes familiar. Conversations feel safe, yet incomplete. There is less tension, but also less depth. The absence of conflict is mistaken for harmony, even as something essential remains untouched. Emotional connection exists in memory more than in experience. Inside, there is often conflict. A quiet pull toward closeness, paired with a hesitation to step forward. The desire to be understood remains, but the risk feels heavier now. Exposure seems unnecessary, even dangerous. Distance, once protective, has become a boundary that is difficult to cross. Resistance forms here, not against others, but against one's own emotional needs. The mind argues for self-sufficiency. It reframes longing as weakness. Wanting closeness begins to feel irrational, given how manageable life feels without it. Yet the emotional body does not fully agree. It senses the cost of silence. The turning point is not an action, but an awareness. A recognition that distance is not peace. It is neutrality. It reduces pain, but it also reduces meaning. The realization arrives quietly, often in moments of contrast. Watching others connect. Remembering how presence once felt. Noticing the difference between being calm and being alive. Healing does not arrive as effort or strategy. It begins as permission. Permission to notice what has been missing without judgment. To understand that distance was not failure, but adaptation. A response to emotional conditions that once felt overwhelming or unsafe. Integration happens slowly. The space does not vanish, but it becomes visible. And what is visible can be held with compassion. Emotional closeness, when it returns, does so gently. Not as intensity, but as honesty. A willingness to feel again, even without certainty. The story of emotional distance does not end with closure. It ends with awareness. A soft understanding that connection fades when it is not protected, and returns only when it is allowed to be felt. And in that understanding, the silence begins to